Well, we're being joined by Mr. Bismarck Rewane to look at the issues of inflation here and how consumers are dealing with it, and of course, the manufacturers. Thank you very much, Mr. Rewane, for joining us. Well, Nigerian consumers have been, at the short end of the stick for ages. Some had hoped that the consumer protection perhaps may be the saving grace for the embattled consumers. But then the consumers are struggling to survive high inflation, soaring unemployment rate, and of course, imminent adjustment of electricity tariffs and petrol prices. So what is the hope for the Nigerian consumer, especially with this recent inauguration of the National Steering Committee on Poverty Alleviation?
You put it right. The Nigerian consumer or the Nigerian citizen, in other words, is embattled. There's a bunker mentality. First and foremost, the economy is struggling. Secondly, the future is unclear. So when you have, when you're struggling and the future doesn't look clear, you become desperate. And a desperate man is a dangerous man. So at this point in time, you're saying, slashing the consumer's throat. Truth is that the throat has already been slashed anyway. So it's how to survive in these trying times. Having said that, we went on a minimum wage from 18,000 to 30,000. And in dollar terms, it was supposedly about $90 a month. Now it's back again to about almost $60 a month. So when confronted with higher prices and lower income, the consumer begins to change its habits and patterns. The NBS has disclosed that 58% of Nigerians actually reduced the amount of food they are consuming in the last 3 months. Not switching to substitutes, but actually reducing the quantity of food, not to talk of the quality and the nutrient value. Right? 26% of Nigerians reduced the amount of non-food items they consumed. Therefore, it's a battle for survival. So that's the context. Now, what does this mean? The question is, who protects this consumer? Is the consumer protected more by regulation or protected more by competition? The answer, well, in a free market economy, consumer is king. But in a free market economy that is rigged, the consumer is a slave, right? So that's the truth. Today, you have, for example, if you want to buy a plot of land from the government, if you want electricity meter, right? The regulations are there that you must get a meter. The regulations are there that you can get a plot of land. But the regulation does not protect the consumer. You will not get that land. You will not get that meter because regulation cannot see you through. The reality is that it is competition. 20, 30 years ago, if you wanted a telephone line, you had to bribe, you had to do that. Today, because of competition amongst the telcos, you can get a SIM card within a second. So the question is, what is protecting the consumer? The reason why this has come up more than anything is that prices have gone up sharply, whilst at the same time, the empirical evidence says that prices are going up, are declining, while anecdotal evidence shows that prices actually, so there's a catch somewhere. Okay. I think that is the context in which we are.
And also we have manufacturers also not spared in this. Not only consumers are facing challenges, also manufacturers with corporates facing squeezed margins. Tell us about this.
Now, see, the manufacturer can only sell to a consumer who has money to buy. So when confronted with this situation and incomes are dwindling, the manufacturer has a choice, either to pass on the increased cost to the market and sell nothing or sell less, or pass on, absorb some of this things so that at least you remain there while others will not survive. So what you're seeing today is that some manufacturers are cost efficient. For example, let me take Nestle, right? The Milo, Maggi Cube, Golden Morn, and all of that. They've passed some of the cost efficiencies because of on to the consumer. So you find that their prices have not increased as sharply as the rate of inflation. In other words, they are absorbing this, but they are absorbing it with cost efficiencies. While the inefficient players have no choice but to pass it on to the market. And basically, they have to adapt or perish. That's the way it is. So the question remains, what prices are going higher, and by how much are they increasing? And then how much is driven by competition, how much of it is driven by regulation, and who protects the consumer eventually.
Now, okay, talking about the prices that are moving, the price of cement has just increased by 21.2%. We're having it at 4,000 naira per bag at the time when Nigerian consumer is reeling. Now, one of the players is clamoring for a form of price control. This same conglomerate has also increased prices of flour and pasta by over 60%. Now, cement is a building material, while flour and pasta are food items. What is your view on the price control, in general, and the selective approach being suggested by the interested party?
Well, they say all is fair in love and war. Now, this conglomerate, and let it be nameless at this point, is saying that please control the price of cement because it's probably a marginal player, maybe less than 10%, right? Whilst in the flour and pasta space, he is a bigger player. So in every industry, you have what they call price leaders and price followers. In any case, in a free market, if you increase your price beyond the indifference point of a consumer, the consumers will move to the others. So first of all, price controls never work. It leads to all sorts of arbitrage and speculative activity. It distorts the allocation of resources. So it is disingenuous for anybody to say, oh, please control the price here, but don't control the price there. Because in business, you have what they call loss leaders. You can decide to take losses in one area while you make profits in the other, but it's the group income that matters. So I would discount that as it's an irrelevant cry by a player that is losing market share, right? But if the price increase, and let us look at cement, cumulatively, in the last 7 or 8 years, the inflation has gone up by more than 110%, while the price of cement has only gone up this year by 21%, and also cumulatively about almost 50 to 60%. So, in other words, the cement industry has been absorbing some of the cost because there's the cost of putting and the cost of transporting cement from one location to the other, especially at a time when there was a recession, especially cement is seasonal. During the rainy season, nobody buys cement. So who are the main buyers of cement? The civil and construction business, real estate, which has been down, and other areas. So what has happened is that you see more roads being built with interlocking blocks and aggregates. So the cement industry is probably fully integrated, but you cannot subsidize that industry. Neither can you exploit, because it's highly competitive between Dangote Cement, which is a dominant player, and Lafarge, who are the key players. Then you have some others who are trying to kind of gain some relevance.
All right. Well, let's still look at this inflation rate. It's reported to be declining, albeit marginally by 17.93%, but anecdotal evidence points to the contrary. With monthly and core inflation, edging higher. But in your opinion, what do you think is responsible for this mixed movement with prices?
Let me put it this way. You say I have no doubt about the integrity of the NBS in terms of publishing data. But one thing we must note is that at this time last year, in April last year, April and May, there was a complete lockdown. There was no movement between states. The markets were shut down. So any enumerator who goes out to go and ask, who were you asking the questions as to what the prices were when the markets were shut? Who were you asking the questions when you couldn't even move? The enumerators couldn't move. The people that were enumerating or collecting data. So most of the data that was used in April and May last year are suspect. So if you are comparing the price of goods in a basket in May 2021 with May 2020 when there was no market, no movement. So you are comparing, this is an opaque situation and this is a transparent situation. The truth will appear when we started opening up, and don't forget it was Ogun State, Lagos, and Abuja that were shut down, but no movement. The airports were closed. Nothing was coming in. The ports were closed. Now, by June, July, we started opening gradually. Then you begin to see the difference. The base year effect that was being talked about was that market in the second quarter of last year was non-existent. Now, let's move forward. So May, June, July, you're going to be seeing this. The price of petrol last year was basically almost about 125 naira a liter at that time. Now it's 165 naira a liter. If you look at almost all the commodities, between last year and this year, there's been a spike that is definitely in excess of the 17.93%. So I think that it will correct itself. But more importantly is the fact that you have monthly inflation, which is the price of a bag of rice last month versus this month, is showing an increase. That is more relevant. So structurally, the economy is struggling. But when you look at it in terms of money supply, which is growing at over 20%, and you look at the cost of doing business, right, there's no way that prices could be declining. I think that the data will correct itself as things become more efficient.
Some analysts have argued that opening our borders could actually help in driving down prices of food. But what do you think about that?
It's interesting that opening the borders, it's a double-edged sword. Yesterday I heard on the radio that our petrol consumption is 103 million liters a day. Peak time, when the economy was growing at 3, 4, 5%, even during the Ojota problem, we're doing 60 million liters of petrol a day. I'm not aware that the roads are full of new cars, new licensed cars and all that. So how come our petrol consumption doubled in this period of contraction of economic activity? So something doesn't add up. So what is happening is that the closure of the border or the reopening of the border has made the border, this is a smuggler's paradise. So basically, you bring the petrol in, you get it at 165, you move it out, and every day, last week I think we had a truck going to Ogun State, and which fell off and along this place. Yeah. One can assume, or one can presume, a better word, that a lot of these trucks are smuggling products across the border because it don't make sense. It's 400 naira a liter across, and you buy it at 165 naira. It's a no-brainer. You make money by going to bed.
Right. You did mention the accuracy of the data that is being churned out. And what do you think are the risks on inaccurate measure of the inflation? How will it impact macroeconomic policies?
Let me say there's incomplete data, there's inaccurate data, and there's all sorts of things. If you do not know how many people are in your house, then in giving money to your wife to go to the market, you are not likely to be correct. So if you were giving her 1,000 naira to go to the market every month, every day, and the children come back on holidays, and you give the same 1,000 naira for, so it is impossible to make any judgment. And I'm using domestic household as a mini example of running a country. So if you are deciding that the number of people here, so data accuracy and data integrity depends on how you use it. So policy making is ineffective or suboptimal if you don't have it correct. So coming back to the point of the fact that what is it? Data integrity, data accuracy, incomplete data, the result is the same thing, that you will make decisions assuming that these are the number of people, or this is what it is, while it is wrong. Therefore, you end up making suboptimal, wrong decisions, which will hurt everybody.
Now, do you think this inflationary, the trajectory we're seeing now is going to continue, or are we likely to still see some kind of reversal?
One of the things that trouble me is that the Food and Agriculture Organization said that food inflation globally is at an 11-year high.
Mm-hmm.
In the U.S., average inflation in the last 10 years was about 2%. Now it's jumped to 5%. We're saying whether is it structural or is it transient. In the UK, it's gone from 0.7 to about 1.5 to 2%.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a global village. We have import content. We have exchange rate depreciation. We have cost of doing business. It just makes me wonder how it's possible for the global and regional trend to be in one direction, and our trend is going. Mind you, but Ghana reported 2 consecutive months of declining inflation. Uganda, a couple of countries. It is possible that last year people took advantage of the shortages and pushed up prices, and now it's correcting. And it's possible also that consumers are beginning to resist. Therefore, but just let's take an example and say, let's take the price of rice.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take the price of gari. Let's take the price of tomato. Each of these things have gone up by more than 60, 70, 80%.
Yeah.
Flour
Okay.
is at 15,500 and it's going to 17,000 on Monday.
All right, we'll continue to watch and see what happens next. Perhaps when they release the next inflation data. Thank you very much, Mr. Rewane, for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we take a break, and then when we come back, we look at all the market developments. Just stay with us.